Okay, so first off, I'm here impromptu, and I'm glad to be here. So thank you, Hamza, Richmond. I've never met you before, so this hasn't been arranged, but I'm really excited to be here, and I want to energize this meeting. And if you all have another 20 to 25 minutes, I will put on a presentation and enable you with critical information to be successful. Richmond and Hamza, should I do it?
Ready,
It's your
ready.
call, man. It's your call.
Okay. So, a little bit of background. I'm only going to spend 60 seconds on this. Okay. So, I'm going to be 64 in November. So, I've had a long career, 40 years. Here are the cliff notes. I studied mathematics and finance at a top university here in the US. As a result of my academic performance, I was recruited into one of the most elite New York-based global investment banks. I became a partner at 26 and a half. 43 of us owned a firm with 6,000 employees, operations in 13 countries around the world. I spent 6 years there, left there, became a managing director at Fidelity Investments Institutional Services Company. Fidelity is the brand. Fidelity Investments is the brand. The corporate holding company is Fidelity Management and Research. I ran their institutional sales in the western third of the United States for 6 years. We were raising 500 to 600 million a month, a 25-person sales team that I headed. Then I left there after 6 years, didn't work for 3 years, became a full-time dad, which was an amazing experience with his mom. And then subsequently, I got involved in industrial technologies. First company I went to was worth 35 million. We sold it for 1.4 billion. 7 years, 6 weeks later, I was the largest non-institutional shareholder. I then did two more industrial technology turnarounds, and now I'm an investor in across an array of spaces, including crypto, neuroscience, biotech, and even waste management, now recently advising a company. So the point of all this is this, and then we're going to get to my presentation. I see the world through a capital markets lens. So what I'm about to show you right now is 3 or 4 slides with a bunch of talking points to really kind of open your eyes to the opportunity that's here with Mining Race. Okay, we're not here selling widgets. Okay, the first thing you need to do is what is going on in the world around me, around my community, around 8 billion people that are inhabiting this world. What is going on? What are the tectonic forces? What are the confluence of events? What are the changes that are taking place that create an opportunity for me? And when you understand that, then you will embrace the opportunity fiercely, as Hamza has been talking about, where you move forward fearlessly with conviction, and it doesn't matter what challenge is in front of you, you're going to get to the top of Mount Everest, which is probably the most difficult thing to do. So with that, I'm going to screen share.
Richmond, can you make him a co-host, please?
Already done. Already done.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna screen share my screen here, and then I'm gonna open up this presentation.
Guys, make notes, notes.
I've got to organize this for some reason. I can't get to the bottom here because here we go. Okay. So the title of my presentation, as you've just heard a little bit, is the Global Macroeconomic and Capital Markets Perspective. What's going on in the world today, and how's that relevant to us? Okay. So here it is. First thing is this. We're going to look at this through the US lens because I'm sitting in the US, but I want you to understand something. I spent in India, living in China in a major multi-billion-dollar startup in Pune, India, traveled all over India. I've lived in Shanghai and Zhuhai, China, spent a year there, and I've traveled, I think with the exception of the poles, I've been on every continent and many, many countries in each of these continents. And I have a global perspective. I sent my 14-year-old son, Caucasian boy, mother is Caucasian, to live and go to international school by himself in Shanghai, China at the age of 14. So I do have very much a global perspective, and we're going to bring it back to that. So let's start with the US, which in this case is extremely important. The United States government publishes an annual report every single year. Very few people read it, and it's readily available on treasury.gov. And the financial report, which is about 250 pages, and we're only going to go over about 2 or 3, highlights the financial performance of the United States government for the preceding year. So the last complete year was 2004, and this was published on January 16th of 2025, and it was signed by Janet Yellen, the then Secretary of Treasury under the Biden administration, and a few days later, President Trump took over the White House. Now, this financial report is probably the most important document that underpins the rise and the incredibly prosperous future of Bitcoin. And here's why. So let's turn the page. On the left is the executive summary. And here it is. Actually, Janet Yellen's page should be, for some reason, it's missing. So on the left is the executive summary for the fiscal year 2024. And you'll see the results in brief. Okay? Now, what's interesting, so this is the executive summary, and there's 250 pages behind it. Let's go down to the last 3 dots, because these are the most important. Okay, so what I did is on the right side of the page, I expanded those 3 dots so that we can all read it here together. And what's interesting is the 3 most important points they buried at the bottom deliberately. Here it is. The statement of long-term fiscal projections shows that the present value of total non-interest spending over the next 75 years under current policy is projected to exceed the present value of total receipts by 72 trillion. So let's unpack this statement. First of all, the United States is $37 trillion in debt, which means we've issued treasury notes, treasury bills, and treasury bonds equaling 37 trillion. These are IOUs. And what this statement is saying is, let's forget the interest payments for a moment on the 37 trillion we owe, which at 5% is 1.5 trillion a year on top of the debt. But let's push that aside. So then it goes on to say, over the next 75 years, under current policy, spending is going to exceed receipts by 72 trillion. Okay, now let's unpack that. So we're going to spend over the next 75 years 72 trillion more than we take in. But notice the term present value. So while that's mathematically correct, it is the present value of 72 trillion over the next 75 years. That is a gimmick, because what they're doing is, by using the term present value, they're masking the fact that the actual the dollars that are going to be spent is going to be 400 to 500 trillion, because they're discounting it back at an interest rate. So while this is mathematically correct, it's mathematically deceptive. So what does this mean? This means the United States government, remember what I said to begin with, let's push aside the interest expense on the 37 trillion we owe. So let's forget about the country's credit card debt for a minute. We're going to spend 400 to 500 trillion more through the end of the century. What does that do for inflation? What does that do to the value of the US dollar, which is the world's reserve currency? It devalues it, and it could be apocalyptic, because you could see the collapse of the US dollar. Now, let's go on to GDP. It says here the GDP stands for gross domestic product. So let's make believe, let me break this down very simply. Let's say I have a salary of $50,000 and I have credit card debt of $50,000. That's kind of high, but it's kind of manageable, right? You can get a little side gig, a little part-time job, and maybe I can keep up with my credit card payments. But what this is saying is that the debt to GDP ratio, in other words, the debt of the government in relations to its economic output, is going to hit 535% by the year 2099, projected. That means that I'm still going to have my 50,000 in salary, but I'm going to have $250,000 in credit card debt. I don't care where you are in the world, but if you make $50,000 in US and you got $250,000 US in credit card debt, you can't survive. The payments will kill you. What does that do to the government ability to protect the value of the dollar? Not good. In fact, it's an existential threat to the US dollar because it is devaluing and it could collapse. And we're going to get to what the significance of that is and at the opportunity for you as a result of this existential threats. So let's go to the third thing, the statement of social insurance. So here in the United States of America, we have something called Social Security and we have Medicare. So when you get to 65 years of age, assuming you've put money in, you can get money back in a month, what's called like a pension, like a monthly, they send you money every month to retire on. And Medicare takes care of like major medical. So what they're basically saying is the government's retirement system for the US citizens and the medical program, we're going to spend 78 trillion more than we take in because everyone pays in, but unfortunately we're going to pay out 78 trillion more. And what did they do again this time? They used what? Present value. Now, I want everyone to sit here and think about this. Let's make believe you have a baby who's a child, 1 year old. And you're thinking, what's college going to cost? Right? So let's say right now college costs $50,000 a year, 4 years, $200,000. First of all, in the future, it's not going to cost $200,000. It's probably going to cost $400,000. So what do you say to yourself? Do you say to yourself, it's going to cost me $200,000 present value, or it's going to cost me $400,000 future value? Because you spend future dollars. You don't spend present dollars, right? You spend future dollars in the future. So what this is saying here between the first and third burger dot is that the United States government is probably going to spend between 800 to 1,000 trillion more over the next 75 years than it takes in. Now, I'm going to ask everyone here and put in the chat box, is this plausible and doable? The answer is no. And we're not even talking about what? The interest expense on the 37 trillion we already owe, let alone the 800 to 1,000 trillion we're going to get in debt through the end of the century. All of these factors is why Bitcoin is going up. And I'm going to explain that in greater detail on the next slide. So here, let's go forward. Okay? Here we go. We're not the only country. Now remember, we're the world's reserve currency. If the dollar collapses, we're taking the world with us. Be mindful of that. Now, let's look on the left. Japan, their debt to GDP is 249%. Far worse than ours. Greece, 168. Venezuela, 146. Look, in Venezuela, there's pictures of kids with wheelbarrows full of currency trying to buy a quart of milk. Why? Because their currency has collapsed. Because there's no faith in it. And the faith in the US currency is starting to diminish. Because why? Because we're spending more than we're taking in, and what are we doing as a result? Printing money, which is known as fiat currency, that's currency that's not backed by gold or commodities or Bitcoin. US at 123, and you can see the whole world is issuing more debt, printing money. Ultimately, the music's going to end, and there's only going to be a few chairs left. So, with global debt soaring, fiat currencies weakening, and central banks throughout the world moving toward digital money, a growing number of institutional investors and individuals are turning their attention to the possibility of a global reset. That is driving governments, sovereign wealth funds, institutional investors of all forms, and high net worth investors into blockchain, DeFi, and Bitcoin. Now, I want everyone to write the following question down. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to grab a pen. Here's the question. I'm going to direct it to Richmond. Richmond. And of course you say Mr. Jones, Mrs. Pradeep, whatever the name is. Mr. and Mrs. Mr. Mr. Martins, what are you doing to protect your dollar-denominated assets, if you're talking to someone in the US, yen-denominated assets, if you're talking to someone in Japan, grivna-denominated assets, if you're talking to someone in Ukraine, renminbi-denominated assets, if you're talking to someone in China, right? Rubles in Russia. What are you doing to protect your dollar-denominated assets against inflation, the devaluation of the dollar, and the potential collapse of the world's reserve currency? What exactly are you doing? And don't say a word. Because, first of all, they may not even understand the question, in which case you have to go through this presentation. And if they do understand the question, 99.99% of the people in the world are going to say what? Nothing. So I'm going to show you a way that's both defensive and offensive to protect your wealth and grow your wealth at the same time in light of the devaluation of currencies around the world and the potential collapse of the world's reserve currency, the US dollar. So this, what I am telling you, is validated by the following facts. And there's more. These are the list of companies around the world that are now putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet. 15 years, when Bitcoin came out, which I believe was a little over, more than a decade ago, this was the province of, like in the US, of like crypto anarchists, guys living in the desert with machine guns, thinking the FBI was going to go raid them and in their little, cabin out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, those were known as crypto anarchists. I'm going to tell you something. Those days are over. This is now an integral part of an asset allocation by investors throughout the world, sovereign wealth funds, governments, and corporations. And what I'm showing you here is a snapshot of all the Bitcoin that's owned by companies around the world. So Bitcoin is no longer a novelty. Bitcoin is no longer the province of crypto anarchists. Bitcoin is no longer the sole province of, quote, techies. This is an institutionally, governmentally, high net worth accepted investment vehicle that is blossoming in price because of the fears that I just pointed out to you. And those fears get worse every day. So what are we seeing? Look at the amount of Bitcoin owned by all these countries, and they're all over the world. So what do we have in mining race? And I'm going to turn off the screen share. Why mining race? So now you understand the context, right? What's going on in the world around me? Look up Ray Dalio. I'm going to spell his name. R-A-Y space D-A-L-I-O. He went to Harvard Business School. He was the founder of Bridgewater and Associates, which is a $100 billion multi-strategy hedge fund. He's retired. The other partners are now running the firm and own the firm. This is one of the most celebrated institutional investors around the world. From scratch, he started Bridgewater and Associates. Zero in his 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. And he thinks the dollar's going to collapse in the next 3 years. Now, do I think it's 3 years? No. Do I think it's 7 to 15? I think it's possible. I think you're going to see shocks and devaluation of the US dollar. And you're going to see that ripple through all nations throughout the world, which is why China, India, and other countries are trying to get off the US dollar and create their own reserve currency. But Trump is preventing that because he's saying, you guys get together and try to get off my currency. I'll hit you with such tariffs, your economies won't survive. He's playing hardball because he can't afford for these countries to leave the US. Because if the demand for dollars goes down, we can't issue more debt and keep this going. This is the reality. So where's the opportunity? Bitcoin. Because it is perceived that and gold are the two stores of value. Think about it. what has gone from $300 15 years ago? Actually, excuse me, 35 years ago. What's gone from $300 to $4,500? Gold. What's gone in 2013, March of 2013, Bitcoin was $100. 12 years later, it's over 100,000. Why? For every reason I just illustrated. So, how do you play Bitcoin? Mining. Because now you have the benefit of getting an established quarterly return on top of the Bitcoin. 14% per quarter on top of the Bitcoin. So you're going to get the Bitcoin and the 14% on when you buy the subscription and the access to the mining machines and so forth. Now, I'm going to tell you why I'm here and why I really like this project. I'm going to be crystal clear about something. Yes, have I been successful? Absolutely. But I've also made some mistakes. I've been in 3 bad crypto projects because I didn't do the due diligence and I threw in, for me, it was a modest amount of money, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 in one case. And what happened? I lost all my money. Why? First of all, I didn't do the due diligence, which everyone here has spoken and says, do your due diligence. The second thing is, it's critical that you deal with people that have 2 key characteristics in life: intelligence and integrity. And if they have intelligence and no integrity, they'll steal from you. And if they have integrity but no intelligence, well, then they can't help you. And I will tell you this. This project is based in the United Arab Emirates. I spent 100 days there in Q4 of last year. And I've also done business previously in the UAE. And for one of my companies, I raised $100 million from a family office in UAE in 2008. The Emiratis have impeccable integrity. And these are Emiratis. These aren't the Ukrainians in Lambos hanging out at the Burj Al Arab. Okay? Okay. You run into Ukrainians and Belarusians with Lambos and Ferraris, and they're hanging out at the, what are those clubs that I forget the name. There's a certain category. Run. These Emiratis will not, they have intergenerational family reputation. My great-great-grandfather from 200 years ago was the first guy out here on a camel. And that reputation through every single generation is absolutely protected. All the gold in the world, they will not do anything in contravention to their business ethics. And in this case, these are real Emiratis. These aren't guys on 10-year golden visas. These are Emiratis who are wearing the robes, extremely religious, and the religion from a strict perspective, from a courtesy perspective, and many of these individuals have held senior government positions. And one of the principals is actually part of the ruling family from Dubai. This is the surety behind the warranty that supports the guarantee. You won't find that in any other project in the world. So I'm extremely excited. I'm invested in this project. I came here impromptu because Hamza, I saw his thing. I'm on his list. I wanted to hear what he had to say, and I'm glad I did. And I volunteered at the last second. I said, hey, Hamza, if you want to hear what I have to say, I'd be happy to support and contribute. So with that, I'll close out my comments. Hopefully this has been helpful. And I'm really happy to be here with all of you. And I'm going to offer, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. In the chat, I want everyone right now, in the US, we have a grading system. A is the highest, then B, then C, and then there's F. Like if you're in elementary school, junior high school, and high school, or secondary school, and even college. I want everyone here who's been listening, give me a grade. A, B, C, or F. I want to see it. Please. Thank you.
Hey, Rob.
Robert, I'm getting messages just like, who is this guy? This is so amazing, amazing energy, the knowledge what you are bringing. in this room, Robert, is something which we have not had before. It's not because you are new, I'm just saying to you these things. No, not at all. It's just because it's the reality. I think that all of us who are here, you guys agree. When you started to speak, we had 46 people. Now we have 45. People stayed, people understand, people listen, and I got messages from the top people already from the company, like asking about you, so we can speak later a little bit about this also. So amazing, Robert.
I'm here to help everybody here. I've become acquainted with Hamza now, 6-7 interactions. Hamza courteously put on the principals on the phone for me and somebody else who's another leader. Hamza's only displayed to me two things: intelligence and integrity. And everybody he's put on the phone. So I'm all in with both feet. I'm going to sit here and admit it. Lost almost $80,000 between 3 projects. I consider that my tuition. As Hamza said, that was yesterday. The only easy, U.S. Navy SEALs have an expression. The only easy day was yesterday.
Yesterday. Yeah.
I
So
can
let's-
always say like this, Robert. I'm humble to learn from you. Really humble to learn from you. It's rarely that I just stick and listen. But my goodness, you deliver something that is amazing. You are amazing, brother.
It is I that is humbled to be with everyone here who's taking on the challenges head on. Let's all climb Everest together and let's do great things. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing real quick? One thing I've noticed about this amazing project is we have all become masters in it. And I can tell you, buddy, Rob, thank you. That's all we can all say.